All right. So welcome to the dumbest, shittiest, most fucked up, disease X-riddled podcast that has ever existed since the dawn of humanity. I'm here with a very special guest, Dave Champion. Say hello, Dave.
Hey there, guys. So I got to tell you, I was totally unprepared for that. I think the only place we can go from here is up.
It's all part of the joke. You know what I mean? It's all part of the joke. So Dave Champion, I wanted to have him on the show. He is the author of this book, which is Income Tax, Shattering the Myths. It's a beefy one. Filled with a lot of great information. And one of the main reasons why I wanted to have Dave on the show and why I'm so excited about Dave being on the show is because he's been doing this for a long time, especially in relation to I've been sitting around thinking about this, and I imagine, Dave, 1994, 1995, and you started learning this stuff, and you wanted to tell people, and not that many people wanted to hear it all these years, and you've been trying to tell people all these years, and then finally, over the past year and a half, there's been this massive explosion in interest in this subject, so that's kind of why I wanted to have you on to talk about all the experiences you've had and kind of like, I remember watching one video where you were talking about the Wesley Snipes situation and how the Snipes team had approached you and they asked you what to do and you said to do a certain thing and they said, oh no, we're not going to do that. And then Wesley Snipes was born. So I kind of wanted to get into just like your storyline, like your background, your whole thing. And we talked a little bit before we started the show. So you found out about this in 1993, and then you said that it took you until about 94, 95 to like tell me about that whole kind of initial time period, what was going on and what happened.
Okay, so I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that 93, when I was first told about it, 94, when I was doing a lot of my research, this was pre-useful internet. Okay? So while the internet existed, worlds away from what it is today. We still had the, what was it, 56K modems,
Yes.
and you go,
I remember that.
When you
I remember that.
Okay. Yes. And web pages would load like, line by line. Okay. So it was completely meaningless in terms of research.
Yeah.
So it was an arduous task back then. At the time, I lived in the northern suburb of Los Angeles, and I drove down to the main Los Angeles County Law Library, which is one of the finest law libraries in the country, I might add. I don't know how many times I drove down there over the years. I mean, literally, it would have to be measured in the hundreds of times. When the ball got rolling, we had so many researchers, I would literally rent a 15-passenger van, and we would load researchers from up in northern Los Angeles County, and we would drive into downtown LA to the main law library or to the UCLA Law Library, and every researcher would have a mission written down. Okay, here's what you're going to do, here's what you're going to do, here's what you're going to do. And then we would all get into the library and poof, go our separate ways, pull all this information that we needed, bring it all back to a central point and start poring over it and seeing if it had validity, if it didn't have validity. So that tells you a little bit about how the learning curve worked back then. As far as my personal journey, if you will, during those first couple of years, I was told about the fact that the U.S. government, its narrative that if you earn some money in America, you earn a living, you have to give some to the government in the form of income tax. I was told in probably about mid-1993 that was false. That was a non-factual characterization of what the income tax actually is. And there were some issues, me coming out of the law enforcement community and the Fourth Amendment and seizing property and whatnot, that didn't resonate correctly with me about the income tax. So, well, I wouldn't say I jumped right on it. I would say that there were enough question marks in my mind that I found it intriguing and I wanted to know the truth. And so I started doing the research. And it was probably, I'm going to guess, someplace between 8 to 11 months before I was able to look myself in the mirror and say, the narrative that these gentlemen told me, that the government story is false, that's true. It's factual. Of course, because there was no internet, and because I don't want to say I was trailblazing, because there were others in the game as well. But as far as getting from where I started to where I wanted to be, I was trailblazing. Okay? And I had a methodology. Just when you investigate things, I think anybody who's done any level of investigation, even if they're researching something on the internet, what you do is you say, okay, this is where I think this may be going. And then you start putting your evidentiary pieces in place, right? And sometimes you look at that line of evidence and you go, well, shit, that didn't work out. That's not valid. Where I presumed it might take me is not where it has taken me, right? So either one of two things is wrong. Either where I presumed it would take me, I was wrong, or I was looking at the wrong evidence, or I needed to adjust. The evidence was all correct, and I needed to adjust my framework in seeing the evidence. But that's a lengthy process when it comes to something as voluminous and complex as income tax law. So this process of acid testing the research probably went on in earnest, framing out, say, 70 or 80% of the question marks. Probably went on for a decade.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
yeah, I was very fortunate that I owned a business, and the guys that worked for me were fabulous, and they really carried a lot of the weight, which gave me the time to invest in what eventually became Income Tax Shattering the Myths. So it was a long curve, and as I started to get the idea that maybe I should write a book, because back when I conceptualized Income Tax Shattering the Myths, there was absolutely no thorough, complete compendium that on what Americans needed to know the truth about the income tax. That complete compendium did not exist. And being more than a decade into it, when I just for the first time thought maybe this should be in a book, I realized the process that you and I just talked about for all those years, right? Acid testing all the evidence and the concepts and the theories, and where is the truth? I realized if I were to ask any American, hey man, you want to go through like a dozen years of arduous research to find out the truth about the income tax? This is the answer I would get, right? So I realized that there needed to be a compendium, and I was naive. You hinted at this early on in your remarks. I was under the impression that the American people, they value, they adore liberty.
Yeah.
And all there needed to be was this comprehensive compendium that they could start on page 1. When they got to page 400 and closed it, they would be like, hell yeah, the truth! and go out and act on it. And I'm not that naive anymore. Yeah.
I've been there, man. I understand completely.
It's been a long road. I'll phrase it that way. From the day somebody told me the truth, I'm 31 years into this now.
Yeah. What is your law enforcement background?
I was a cop for 6 years in Los Angeles.
6 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I had to get out.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah. How can I phrase this? Again, being naive. It was not the job that I imagined it would be going in. I thought that, the narrative is, at least in my head, the narrative was I would like to be of service to the people of whatever community I serve. Okay? And that's not what the job is. When people say it's being of service to the community, that's a tiny, tiny part of the overall job, and there's a lot of politics involved, and there's a lot of money on the table. and who's getting the money and when. And I don't mean graft. I mean, appropriated money from various legislatures and whatnot, and grants and whatnot, and annual budgeting. And all that money impacts what the agencies are willing to do, even if something is tremendously successful at reducing gang activity, narcotics, street narcotics dealing. Even if somebody comes up with a program that's tremendously successful, that program or the person who conceptualized it actually became the enemy because it threatened the money. Just speaking in big, broad themes, if you could reduce gang activity by 35% and street narcotics dealing by 40%, the way management looks at that is next year, and you can validate those numbers. Next year, when you go up for an appropriations hearing and you say, oh, our agency needs more money. Why would you need more money? The gang problem is well on its way to being resolved. The street narcotics dealing is the lowest it's been in decades. Why do you need more money? So things like that, it turned out that's not service to the community. That's service to the agency. That's self-promotion. That's making sure that the budget each year is greater than it was the year before. And I'm not talking about inflation. I'm talking about real dollars. So there's a whole lot of an agenda that goes into law enforcement that I wanted nothing to do with. And it turned out not to be the environment I wanted to be in.
That makes perfect sense. And then who was it that first told you about all this tax stuff? You said someone told you. Who told you? Like, and how did you know this person?
I was in the telecommunications industry. I owned a company that sold high-speed data transmission equipment and rather sophisticated voice gear. Now, those are all relative terms because we're talking about, the late 80s and early 90s. And there was a gentleman I met that he was the IT director. And as such, he had control over all the data communications, all the voice communications. And I met him when I went for an appointment with one of these companies. I forget why I was there specifically. I think it was a big PBX system they needed for their business. And I met with the president of the company, great guy. And he said, well, at this point, I'm going to turn you over to our director of IT. He's the one who's going to handle it. And it was kind of an upscale industry at that time. I was wearing expensive suit and $400 Italian loafers because that's what you had to do. I mean, that was the uniform of the day, right? So yeah. I'll never forget. I'm just going to use a first name for today. His name was Leonard. And so I go to get introduced to this guy. And he is this big, muscular black dude, like black like coal, right? And he's like, yo, what up, man? What's going on? And I'm like, he was just so different from anybody who was involved at that level in corporate America at the time. He still talked just like his speech patterns developed when he was growing up down in the South. He's older than I am, so the South was a different place back then, right? And he could do. I don't know if you ever heard, some of these like black rappers. They're like, whoa, yo, but then they'll say, I can speak just like you. I choose not to.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So Leonard chose to keep his older speech patterns and not to adopt sort of like the white corporate culture, and that was kind of, off-putting for me at first because back then, I was a tie on a picture of rectitude, right? And this guy was just, to me, he seemed bonkers. And it turned out we lived somewhat close together. And we got to know each other and we became incredibly close, and we still are to this very day. And so I was having dinner with him, and $32,000 had just been taken out of my payroll account for my workers by the IRS. And so he had another IT friend, Darren. So Darren and Leonard and I are sitting having dinner, and I'm telling him this story. And I didn't know anything about income tax, IRS, or anything else. I had an accountant on retainer. And he had dropped the ball, but I didn't know that. And so I'm telling them a story, and they look at one another and start laughing. I'm like, okay, so, and $32,000 back in like 1993, that was some real money, right?
Yeah.
And I had an ethical commitment to the people who were working for me that on payday, they got their money. So I had to go scrounge up $32,000 that just disappeared like that. So they start laughing, and I'm like, okay, guys, not really sure when your friend just got tagged for 32 grand that laughter is the appropriate response. And they said, you'd be laughing too if you knew what we know. Bring it on. If there's something that I should be knowing, and they said, we don't pay income tax, ever. What? Why? Because you don't have to, dude. They're like, we can't believe you don't even know this. I'm like, I was an Army Ranger, I was in law enforcement. I'm part of the established, right? And then went and opened a business that dealt with relatively large corporation. Like, I am the establishment. What the fuck are you talking about? So they gave me the broad outlines, and then they stopped. They said, we're not going to tell you anything more because we always tell people they don't listen and we've wasted our breath. So here's 2 books. You go get these books and you read them. Once you show that amount of ass, then we'll tell you more. Okay, so the next morning, again, no internet. I'm dialing numbers and reading my credit card number off to them so they can send me these books, right? It seems so antiquated today, right? Amazon didn't exist.
No, I remember the late night commercials and the Now 16 and the CDs. And I was born in '86, so I may seem like a little baby, but I remember all that stuff, man. The '90s were wonderful. I remember.
So I got the books, and so they decided to tell me more, and I heard them out, and I read both books. And I don't know at that point if I agreed with them, but I think I would have gone so far as to say, I smell a rat. Something's not right. If you'd asked me to tell you what was not right, I probably couldn't have told you. It was more of an instinctual thing. Something just isn't adding up here. So Leonard put me in his car, and he drove me about 45 minutes to a friend's house and again, we became friends, and we are still, his name is Murray, we're still friends to this day. And he said, he's up in whatever the unit number was, go see Murray, I've got some errands to run. So I went up to see Murray, and Murray, his whole kitchen and living room looked like a law library. And he was sort of like the guru of, more like the Yoda of the movement at that time in the geographical area that I lived in. And so he started showing me things, pulling out documents. Well, here, read this. Pull out another document. Read that. I think one of the things that surprised the hell out of me coming out of law enforcement, the courts, the federal courts in the possessions and territories are not part of the judicial branch. And I looked at a document where it said that the federal courts in the possessions and territories are actually agencies within the Department of Interior. Okay. And that was not directly related to income tax, but I think the point that the picture he was attempting to paint for me with all these documents he was showing me was, you're living a lie. You think X, Y, and Z are true. That's just the picture that's been painted for you. But really, the truth is ABC, not X, Y, Z. And I'm not a headache guy. I've probably had like 6 headaches in my whole life. I'm 64 years old. When I walked out of his place after the 3rd hour, I had a headache. The volume.
Yeah, I can imagine.
He was shooting documents and information at me out of a fire hose, and a lot of it was shocking. And that was another, if we say here was a moment, here was a moment, here was a moment, that was one of those moments where I said, there's so much that he just showed me that probably not 1 in 250,000 Americans know.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that we don't know, the fact that the government is saying, hey, look at this, when in reality, oh no, the reality is over here. We don't want you to look over here. We want you to look over here. Okay.
Yeah.
That was a problem for me, because if you're doing the right thing and you're telling the truth and you're honest dealing, then transparency should be the order of the day.
Did you feel betrayed because you were previously in the Army and in law enforcement?
Betrayed, no, because I think that's a personal sentiment. I think what it would be fair to say is that I was coming to a growing realization that the government was betraying the American people.
Mm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've always sort of been a self-accountability guy. So the fact that I may have, again, that naivete theme, the fact that I may have gone into the military thinking this or law enforcement thinking that, that's pretty much on me. But when you talk about something like lying to an entire nation and knowing you're lying to an entire nation and you're attempting to go after and punish people who know the truth or who speak the truth so that the lie can prevail, and people are afraid to speak the truth, are afraid to even look at the truth because they're so fearful of the government, that's betrayal. And that's not betrayal of Dave Champion. That's betrayal of honor. That's betrayal of the duty that they have when they take an oath. That's betrayal of the trust that the American people place in every single elected official and every single appointed person in the government. Okay, there is an expectation on the part of the American people. Maybe this is more naivete on my part. There's an expectation, I believe, on the part of every single American that those people are going to show some rectitude.
Yeah.
And the picture is becoming clear that in reality, at least as far as the income tax, at that point, my thought was, I have discovered that the United States government is a predatory, lying piece of shit. And that's a problem.
Well, the IRS isn't even part of the government, which makes it even more complicated. But yeah, it's.
I've heard the narrative, but if you look at the legislative history, it actually is.
Really?
Yeah.
All the research that I've done on it, it's like it's basically just a collections agency, and its primary client is the U.S. Treasury.
Well, okay, so if we go back and look at it historically, and you look at like the historical notes on the creation of the Internal Revenue Service, in 1862, Congress created a position they called the Commissioner of Internal Revenue. And legal historians say that although Congress didn't create the IRS back then, that in the parlance of the day, as they viewed things then, because they didn't have agencies like we have agencies today, when they created the Office of Commissioner of Internal Revenue, they believed, because the commissioner obviously needs a staff, needs an organization, right? Nobody can do the job by themselves. So Congress, by creating the Office of the Commissioner of Internal Revenue, believed that they were creating what today we would call an agency. Although at the end of the Civil War, it basically fell into complete disuse, and didn't become really functional again until right around just prior to World War II. And back then it was called the Bureau of Internal Revenue. But here's the part going to the issue of government, non-government. It was if you looked at the organizational charts back then, it was a bureau within the Treasury Department, which is a cabinet office. Okay? And then it was 57-ish, I believe, that they changed the name from Bureau of Internal Revenue to Internal Revenue Service. And if you look back at the legal records, it was simply a name change. They did transfer some functions because it had been doing alcohol before that. So they transferred some of the functions to a different agency for alcohol purposes. and then they changed the Bureau of Internal Revenue to the Internal Revenue Service, and it was focused solely on taxes unrelated to alcohol.
Yeah, because I remember one time looking at a definition of the term court of the United States in the United States Code, and it says does not include tax courts. And I thought that was so fascinating. And then a lot of the research I've done. Yeah, go ahead and explain that.
Okay, yeah, I thought I would. It's that simple, so I'll give it quickly. So we know what Article 3 courts are, right?
Yeah.
Okay, the Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution, federal courts. Okay. So there's this other form of court called Article 1 courts. These are courts created by the legislature to perform a specific function, and that function is purely administrative. Mm-hmm. Even though a guy or a gal walks in the black robe and gets up on that big high bench, and the whole thing looks like a courtroom and it acts like a courtroom, it's actually what's called an Article 1 court. And it's Article 1 courts, before they came up with the idea of calling them courts, which was about the early 70s, they were typically known as the such and such board, like the immigration board or the tax board, okay? Tax appeals board in particular for taxes. And then I think it was 72, Congress changed the name of the Board for Tax Appeals to tax court. They just, now we're going to call it a court, but it didn't change in any legal sense what it was. It's still nothing but an administrative process. It's got no judicial side whatsoever. That whole part this goes back to what we were talking about a little bit ago, where the government has made it look like one thing, when in fact the truth is something else. The tax court is nothing more. If you put three guys in suits sitting at a table, fold out legs and steel chairs, you put three guys sitting there and they heard your tax case, which is how it used to be done, by the way.
Wow.
That's, legally speaking, it's absolutely no different than what tax court is. There's no real judge there.
Yeah.
And those judges...
Yeah, I find that to be fascinating.
Those judges are not part of the judicial branch.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a commercial activity, basically, at that point.
Yeah, they are employees of the agency.
Yeah. So, okay, so going back to 1994, you're doing this research for 10 years. Your book, the version I have here, which I bought this probably last year, maybe even a little bit before that, maybe a year and a half ago. This one, when did you write this book?
It was released, well, I wrote it over a couple of years, but it was released in 2010.
Okay, I see the copyright here. Okay, and then second printing was March of 2012. Okay. So, wow. So for 10 years, up until 2004, you were doing heavy research before 2004 was when you were like, okay, I think I really got this. That was the point when you were like, I think I nailed this down. Is that right?
And yes, and I began writing what eventually became Income Tax Shattering. I began writing it and stopped, and then started again and stopped and started again quite a few times. And the reason was this. I had a standard that I set for myself. And the standard was, until I have such a command of this subject matter that I could literally, you know what speed dating is?
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. I love it.
Okay. So my thing was, imagine speed challenging by the U.S. Department of Justice Tax Division. I would sit in a chair. They would have a line of tax attorneys that work for DOJ. And they would come and pose a challenge to me. And I would blow that guy out of the water. And he would go, and a female attorney would sit down, and she'd pose a question or challenge me, and I'd blow that one out of the water. The next attorney. I set a standard for myself that until I could take down 100% of the tax attorneys that work in the U.S. Department of Justice Tax Division on any challenge or question they would pose, I could not ethically ask anyone to pay me for what today we know as income tax shattering the mess.
I see.
Because
So
if I can't beat or answer every question, I can't take anybody's money.
yeah, I'm totally tracking with you. I'm of the same mind. So 2004 until 2010 you were writing. When did you start doing this more professionally, and did you have like a website, or did you have like a blog, or did you have like smaller writings, or what was that time period there after 2004 to 2010? What did that look like?
Well, what is euphemistically called the tax honesty movement was very robust back then. It was kind of odd because there was no social media, and again, the internet was not a usable thing. But man, there was a lot of players on the playing field, and a lot of team captains. Okay, so for instance, there was a gentleman, I can't remember his name after all these years. His big pitch was the Fifth Amendment. Okay? You don't have to fill out a tax return because that requires you to provide information under penalty of perjury that could be used against you in a later criminal case, so you don't have to file a tax return. Okay? The Fifth Amendment.
Good point.
There was the 861 position. I know you'd mentioned Wesley Snipes a little bit ago.
That's the one that Wesley Snipes did. We're going to get into that in a minute for sure. That's one of the most exciting things I want to talk about in this show. But go ahead and continue with what you were saying.
Okay, so God, what was the name of the guy who originally started that? The 861. I can't remember his name right now. But then it was eventually picked up by Larkin Rose, who pretty much nationalized it. Right? Larkin did a great job of spreading the message of the 861 argument. There were any number of these segments within the tax honesty community, and it was very robust. And then in 2000, there was We the People Foundation for Constitutional Education held a big conference in Las Vegas, and probably 60 or 80 of the best tax researchers in the country got together for 3 days there. Again, very robust. Nothing like that exists today, but it was very robust. And so what it looked like for me, and
you were the founder of that. You were the head honcho of that.
Oh, no. That was Bob Schulz. No, I at that point, I was not well known because Income Tax Shattering the Myths had not yet come out. I was pretty much known amongst the researchers. It's like if you're a nurse working like in the surgical department, all the nurses know one another. Okay, so it was kind of like that in the tax honesty community. If you were a researcher doing hardcore research to get at the underlying facts, they're kind of like all the researchers knew each other across the country. Okay. But I wasn't well known in the same sense that I am today. But I will tell you an interesting occurrence that happened. Now, remember, it would be nice to think that all these people were doing this altruistically, but again, turned out not to be the case. A lot of these people were making money. They had their little segment of people who followed them, and they would market various resources to the people who followed them, and they would make money. And when I came out with Income Tax Shattering the Myths, nobody wanted to know me anymore. These leaders of these various sects within the movement, nobody wanted to know me anymore. And the reason was that once people read Income Tax Shattering the Myths, they no longer had any need to follow this guru or that guru or the other guru. They no longer had a need to follow them, participate, and pay them for resources, because now, with holding Income Tax Shattering the Myths in their hands, they had all of the realistic answers that they needed. And oddly, here we are in 2024, and most of the people that back, say, in 2000, 2002, 2004, that I viewed as friends no longer speak to me.
Wow.
Because Income Tax Shattering the Myths screwed up the flow of their money.
Interesting. Yeah, I can understand how that could be.
Very weird.
So between 2004 and 2010, were you just researching and you just had your business that was running on its own and you were just kind of spending a lot of your time doing that, or what were you doing between 04 and 10?
I was engaged in a number of different businesses. I've been a lifelong use of force instructor, firearms, tactics, and use of force is its own narrow category outside those two. So I did a lot of that. I spent a lot of time working with individuals who understood the truth of the income tax, but maybe not how to implement that in real life. Okay. There's theory, and then there's how do you do it in the real world. By the way, I want you to know, and I want your audience to know, that when I first learned the truth, when I say there's ways to do it, I know this. I know there are ways to do it because I completely fucked it up. I was more than a little bit angry at what I had learned. And so I would take on a new client or a customer, depending on which side of the business we were talking about at the time. And they would say, oh, I need you to fill out this W-9. And then I knew. I was one of the first adopters, one of the only people who understood at that time that income tax is a form-driven system, and that it is executing things like Forms W-9 and Forms W-4 that then produce 1099s and W-2s that actually create the legal presumption, because you sign them under penalty of perjury, right? So it creates the legal presumption that you've raised your hand and said, me, I'm the guy who owes the tax, come fuck with me. So I was one of the early adopters in understanding that you never fill out a tax form. If you know the whole thing's a scam, you stop that. So people would say to me, oh, yeah, love having you do business. Your company is fantastic. Your techs are wonderful. Really love the relationship. I need you to fill out this W-9. And I would just tell them, no, I don't do that. And then if they would say, well, I need you to do that to give me a check so I can give you a check. My point of view at that time was, oh, so you're on the enemy's fucking team.
Withholding agent, it's always fun.
Yeah. It was like, so let me see if I get this right. You're a constituent part of the fucking scam? That's how I saw somebody in business who would make what they considered to be a completely normal. So probably in about the first 18 months after I realized the truth, I slit my throat to the tune of about 2/3 of my annual income.
Yeah, I mean, when I teach all this stuff, it's my number one rule, and everything I do and everything I have, it's always, don't get mad. If you get mad, take a deep breath. Don't take action while you're getting mad. And then also intent. Like I've been around the block. I do a lot of mainline litigation and stuff now, and I'm at the point now where I literally don't think anyone knows any of this about anything, and they just, every time you think someone knows and they're using it against you, or you think that they know and that they have the intent to con you or whatever, it's just not true. I just don't. I think that 99% of people, when they actually do take a moment and look at this information for real, they realize like, oh, geez, they might be scared because they have a job and they have a family and they don't want to rock the boat too hard. But there's minimum, there's seed planting, and then the seed takes, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, 3 years to, but a lot of times, just like what you had expressed, where you had this $32,000 amount that was pulled out of your bank account. I had a similar thing where for 2 years, this woman was trying to tell me all sorts of things. I wouldn't listen to her. And then the Employment Development Department came knocking on my door and trespassing on my property, and sent me a bill for my employees to the tune of $60,000, of which we couldn't pay. And that was the impetus that got me into all of this. So it's all seeds. You plant the seeds and then you never know when they're going to grow. But yeah, it's my number one rule. And from everything I've seen, which I've seen thousands or tens of thousands of people send in things to all over the place, Department of State and IRS. And as long as you are not hostile and combative and angry, and as long as you don't assume the person in front of you has the intent to do what you think they have the intent to do, because intent in law is everything, you'll be just fine. And I've seen people send in so many insane, stupid things, and they're just kind. And we do a lot of crazy things. We for a long time we were doing like Polaroids and love letters and poems, and we kind of went off the deep end on the other side of the equation, and it was effective. Actually, I mean, litigation is much more effective, and I prefer it. That's why I'm doing it. But Polaroids and love letters and poems, and I used to write cover letters, and I'd be like, hey, like, here's a Polaroid, that girl that you've had your eye on the couple cubicles over. I'd be like, this is the chance, man. Like, I'm there with you. Like, show her the Polaroid, use it as a tool to get things rolling. And for all I know, I've made girlfriends or wives or children or who knows, sending these things in. But yeah, it's the number one tenet of everything that we do. And I think that's funny that you mentioned that, because yeah, I could totally see where that would head.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And, as you just so clearly just communicated, the law is, I call it this, the law is sterile. Okay. The law has no emotional component to it. People put emotional content behind it.
Yeah.
And I learned the hard way, and I shared for many, 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 many years with people that do not put your emotional content into a communication concerning the law. It will not benefit you in the end. Because as you point out, usually the person who's looking at it, they're just a poor dumb schmuck who doesn't know anything to begin with. So, yeah. I mean, does it fall on deaf ears when you rage against somebody who doesn't have a clue what the hell you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yes, it does have an effect, though, by the way. It makes them hate you and want to get rid of you.
Yes, that's right. That's correct.
Yeah.
Or report you, or worse, Yeah,
yes,
yeah. Totally tracking with that. So you lost all your income. You lost 2/3 of your income, freaking out. That's funny. So that's what occurred. So between 04 and 10, you were working, taking on clients, practicing all of this information that you had learned and putting it to the ground. But you were upset still about this. You were upset for you were upset for 15 years then, basically. You were pissed for 15 years.
I would say I'm still upset.
Okay. That's good to know. Okay, good.
but one can only maintain outrage for so long. Okay.
Yeah, and for some reason, I just find it all so fascinating. I don't know if in your book you get into like bills of exchange and negotiable instruments and that kind of whole side of things, but we take the IRS bills, which are actually bills of exchange. Bill means bill of exchange. A bill of exchange is an unconditional order to pay. And we actually endorse the bills of exchange and send them back, and they process them and they zero out the account. It's the easiest thing in the world. Now, in my opinion, and I don't know, this might irritate you a little bit, but from my opinion and my own experiences, I've dealt with a lot of different organizations and banks and credit unions and credit bureaus, and I've sent a million different things, and I'm involved in 3 cases, and my people don't even know yet. This is brand new. But my Amex case, my American Express case, which is like a huge part of my whole lineage of this whole thing, actually went live yesterday in the evening, and I'm actually going to post it today after I get off this show with you, and everybody's going to go like berserk. But basically, the IRS follows the codes better than any other organization I have ever dealt with. Like, if there's a code and it says, a bill of exchange is a negotiable instrument, and you can endorse the negotiable instrument, and it's actually considered a payment, which is what the law says in Uniform Commercial Code Article 3. You do that with a bank or a credit union or a finance company or a car or anything. They freak out. They pretend that no. They say this isn't a payment we accept. Almost nobody will follow the law when it comes to negotiable instruments and bills of exchange. The IRS, they'll process it immediately. No fanfare, no questions. They're the only organization that will do so. We have to litigate aggressively and fight tooth and nail to get most other banking institutions to actually follow these laws. So it's just kind of fascinating. It's something that I find the IRS to be really easy to work with when you actually know what the laws are. The problem is that I don't even think anyone in the IRS knows what the laws are, because I call in and I say, oh, I need an EIN for a private foreign irrevocable trust and blah, blah, blah. And they go, okay. And they go, oh, we need a POA. And I go like, oh, well, depending on certain jurisdictions, a POA can only be between a natural person and another natural person, but this is not a natural person. This is a trust. This is a different type of person. Oh, excuse me, sir. Let me research this for about 5 to 7 minutes. Put you on hold. They put me on hold for 5 or 7 minutes, and they come back and they actually get whatever answers that they need, and they'll do the research. But they do all the research live on the phone with me. They don't have a clue, right? So I find that to be fascinating, that you call the IRS and you ask them questions, and they'll actually go and do research and come back, and they can coherently have a conversation with you. If you try doing that when it comes to money and negotiable instruments and a lot of the stuff that we talk about and we study, they won't even talk to you. They don't have a clue. They don't even know who to ask. They don't have, there's nothing. Like if you want to get anything done with a bill of exchange, you have to basically litigate, because there's not even anyone that wants to like talk to you or anything. So it's just kind of interesting. My relationship with the IRS has been interesting, because I feel like there's this law, and they follow it so unthinkingly, even internally, that even on their end, there's just no emotion, just zero. Whereas in a banking institution like American Express or Chase, there's a lot of emotion that people will inject into these transactions. The IRS never does that, ever.
So I have a theory on this. It's because IRS employees don't give a fuck. So why get upset if you don't really give a fuck, right?
Yeah.
So now I will share an alternative point of view. A recent story shared with me by a friend that shows the lack of emotion that you were just talking about on behalf of the IRS, but it also shows that they don't care what the presumptive taxpayer says to them. So a friend of mine went down and met with the IRS. And so I don't know if you've watched my videos. I know that you've read some of Income Tax Shattering the Myths, but as an example, in the 111 years since the income tax was enacted, there are 10 Treasury decisions that say the Form 1040 is to be used by non-resident aliens with U.S. source income or their domestic agent. Okay? There's 10 of those over 111 years. There are 0 Treasury decisions that say anyone else is to use a Form 1040. Okay?
That's interesting.
So the Secretary of the Treasury has been crystal clear. These forms are exclusively for the use of non-resident aliens with U.S. source income or the non-resident alien's domestic agent. There are 3, Congress has imposed the income tax on just 3 classes of persons: non-resident aliens with U.S. source income, foreign corporations with U.S. source income, and U.S. citizens residing abroad with foreign earned income, okay, the Form 2555. So those are the 3 classes. Congress has not imposed the income tax on anybody else. So this friend of mine, he went to an IRS meeting and he sat down with them, and he shared this with me after the meeting. And he lays this all out to them. And he says, so why are we here? You may have something you consider presumptive evidence, but that's not the same as facts. He's like, the facts are Congress has imposed the income tax on these 3 classes, and the fact is I don't fit within any of those 3 classes. Okay. And he said that the response of the IRS agent was, oh, so you're part of some movement, right? I've heard all this stuff before. And as he told me that story, I'm thinking, you're part of some sort of movement. Yeah, this movement that actually believes you should follow the fucking law.
Yeah.
But the way he characterized it to me, her attitude was dismissive and disrespectful.
Yeah, of course.
Such that she didn't believe a word he said and didn't care that that's what the law said, because that has never been taught to her by the agency for which she works.
Mm.
Okay. So just a different experience somebody recently had from, you say that they've been pretty amenable to work with. And then we have an experience like this gentleman's, and where they were completely dismissive. They're like, we don't care what the law says. We have this presumptive evidence over here. Now, you understand the difference between a conclusive presumption and a rebuttable presumption, right? So they've got, and since 1977, the Supreme Court said all presumptions in an administrative or legal form are rebuttable, because conclusive presumptions are a violation of due process, right? So
yeah,
the IRS agent had these documents like 1040s, right? Not 1040, excuse me, 1099s that are presumptive evidence. And so his point that he was making, or attempting to make, was the fact construct under which you're working is not accurate. You've got these presumptions, but let me effectively, factually rebut them, and now your presumptions collapse in the face of actual facts. So now what are you going to do? That's the way, that's the way the whole process is supposed to work. That's due process. You believe, the government believes they know something, you get an opportunity to rebut it. If you can effectively rebut it through documentary evidence and sworn statements, they got nothing. Okay? And this agent was completely dismissive. Now, in the end, she's going to get her ass handed to her, but that was what happened in the meeting. And by the way, there is a statute in the tax code that allows citizens to sue IRS agents in their personal capacity who violate the constitutional boundaries of their job.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I do have to say, I know there's been multiple eras of Internal Revenue Service, and so I don't know. I don't want to get into this too much, because with my audience, they're very familiar with these kinds of terms. Do you talk about in your book anywhere? I'm assuming the answer is a resounding yes. Or do you talk a lot on shows about the revocation of election to be treated as a U.S. resident for the purpose of determining your income tax liability, and like that whole sending in that affidavit and then having them process that? Do you talk about that at all?
I do not, and may I explain why?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'm going to use an analogy.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want the government to hold you accountable for homicide, murder, actually. If you don't want the government to hold you accountable for murder, the best way to do that is not to commit a murder. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, as I mentioned a moment ago, Congress has imposed a tax on the three classes that we covered.
Mm-hmm.
And if one is not within any of those three classes, it's like not committing a murder. There's nothing further to do, because, as you well know, Congress passes laws, the president signs it. It falls under the jurisdiction of one of the cabinet offices. In the case of taxation, it's the Treasury Department, and the Treasury, the IRS is a division within the Treasury Department, and you can actually see delegation of authority orders directly from the Secretary of the Treasury down to the Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service, who redelegates it down within. So we can see all of this, but it is all enforcing a tax that has been imposed on U.S. citizens residing abroad with foreign earned income, non-resident aliens with a U.S. source income, and foreign corporations with a U.S. source income. Those are the three classes upon whom it's been imposed. So, from my point of view, and I'm not trying to criticize revocation of election. What I'm saying is, you don't want to be held accountable for murder, don't commit a murder. If you don't want to have to play ball with the IRS, clean up the administrative record by evidencing it, that you're not within the three classes they're permitted to enforce the tax upon, and you're done. And I do I do have a concern about revocation of election. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying this is so. Okay. But there is an entire department within the IRS that does nothing all day long but look at things that it considers.
You're talking about CID, Criminal Investigation Division?
No, that's more criminal. No, there's one that works on like what they consider to be frivolous tax arguments.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, so there's an entire department that works on these. And so you remember Irwin Schiff with the zero return. Okay. Irwin Schiff was recommending that people file a zero return. And his logic behind that was that people were terrified not to file a return because they didn't want to risk being prosecuted. So in Irwin's construct, since you don't owe the tax, just go ahead and file the form and put zero. And that way they can't go after you for willful failure to file, which turned out not to be true because, well, I won't get into that. That's a whole other side circus. But the bottom line is the IRS accepted these zero returns for years until the number of zero returns reached the point where the service said, okay, now we need to take a look at this. And they assigned it to this group of people who look at, frivolous tax positions and tactics, tax protesters, what they call them, right? So eventually what they started to do was go back through their records and come after every single person who'd filed a zero return. Okay. So it looked like for a handful of years, it looked like, Irwin was the god of the, tax revolution, and he hit the nail on the head, and all you had to do was file the zero return and yada, yada, yada. You remember, with Larkin Rose and the 861 argument, there was a number of years when the 861 argument appeared to be prevailing. There's, what's that other guy's name? Pete Hendrickson, I believe is his name. And he was advocating that you file a 1040 with what is an 8734. So all of these worked for a couple of years, 2 years, 5 years, 6 years, until the threshold was reached of people doing that, when the IRS said, okay, now we have a problem. We have to look at this. And all of those have fallen apart after they reached the threshold and they were given consideration by this group that works on frivolous arguments and tax protester arguments. So my point is this about the revocation of election. I'm sure the IRS considers that similar to the 861, similar to the zero return, similar to filing a 1040 with an 8734 and so forth. They consider it not right, not proper, not appropriate, not lawful. So I don't know that there's any sort of...
We've gotten a couple, just real quick, we've gotten a couple of letters back, very, very rarely, but I've seen two personally, where they say, thank you very much, we have received and processed your revocation of election. There was nothing more needed on your account. If you need anything else, let us know. And it's like straight up. But they almost never send those, but I've seen a couple of those myself.
Yeah, and I've had people tell me about those as well. My concern is this, and again, I'm not saying it is so because I don't know that it is so. My 30 years of experience causes me to have concern that at some point those REOs or ROEs that get sent in are going to get sent immediately over to this department, and then there's going to be a problem. That may not have happened yet. It may never happen, but I've seen it happen time and time and time again. So I am concerned that at some point filing the ROE will be seen by the IRS as, oh, take a special interest in me. So I'm not saying it's there. I'm not saying it's ever going to happen. I've just seen that sort of thing happen. So it raises a concern.
So what do you do, or what do you recommend that someone do in order to correct and clean up prior tax forms and W-9s and their files and all their agreements and everything with the Internal Revenue Service? Like, what do you send in? Do you send in like just a correction to correct the account on various accounts, or what do you send in?
Oh, I don't send in anything because I haven't talked to them in years. But I'll tell you what my philosophy is. The federal courts have said that once you filed a return and paid the tax, you can never get it back unless you have a legitimate argument that you can make on a 1040X to amend your original 1040, and you have to do that within 3 years. And the IRS will only consider your 1040X legitimate and valid if it plays by Subtitle A rules and so forth. Okay. So the idea when people say I paid the income tax for 25 years that I never really owed, give me all my fucking money back, the federal courts have said you cannot do that. Okay. So my approach, my understanding is that people need to realize they got bamboozled. And once they know the truth, they need to say, okay, from here back, I got bamboozled. I got robbed. From here forward, I'm not playing that anymore. Okay? So I don't see that there is a value, in my opinion, to trying to clean up errors. Now, if the agency, we'll use myself as an example. If the agency were to come to me, say, Dave Champion, we believe that for 2021, you owe us income tax because back in 1987, you filed a 1040. You swore under penalty of perjury that either you're a non-resident alien with U.S. source income or the non-resident alien's domestic agent. Either way, you fucking swore to it in 1987. So for whatever income you had in 2021, you fucking owe us a tax return. Okay. So if the government came to me and said that, they wanted to use yesterday as a justification for tomorrow, there is something called, of which you're well familiar, administrative due process. And one of the funny things is people who are in the income tax research world, they laugh when I say this because it's so true. IRS letters say one thing on the surface when you pull it out, you read it. It says one thing, which is never what it means. Okay. So a good example of that would be the W-9. Okay. The W-9 does not say anywhere on it, you are to fill this out if you are a U.S. citizen or a domestic corporation who is receiving income that belongs to a non-resident alien or foreign corporation. Okay? That doesn't appear anywhere on the W-9, but that's what it means. Okay? The 1040, nowhere on it does it say it's to be used by non-resident aliens or their domestic agent. But the Secretary of the Treasury, way over there, buried in 10 Treasury decisions, says that's the only people who are to use it. So, one more example. There's something that the IRS will send to companies. If somebody claims exempt on their W-4, the IRS will send a letter to the company, and on the face of the letter, it says you are now to withhold it $0. Okay? When there's a catalog the IRS has of all of its forms, and there's a part of that catalog where it describes what the IRS legal department has approved that form to do. Okay? So you can't use the form, in theory, outside what the attorneys at the IRS have approved it to be used for. So while on the face of the letter, when they send it off to a company, it says you are now to withhold it $0, the approved use for the letter is to tell a company to withhold that other than $0. So it's been approved for something over here in this hemisphere, and the IRS used it for a completely illegitimate purpose. It literally prints out on the paper something different than what it's been approved. Okay, so I know we had a point here that we were going to, and I had so much fun telling you the stories that these forms don't mean what they say on the face.
So let's explain. Go ahead and explain the 861 real quick, because I think what I like to do. I know the 861 is what Wesley Snipes did, right? Because I'd like to get into that's what I'm most excited about hearing about. I'm like thrilled because you know, to this day, especially anyone above the age of 45, you say, income tax, or you don't need to pay, or it's a voluntary system. You say, and what do they tell you? They say Wesley Snipes, right? And the only guy that I know that has a lot of information about this is Mr. Dave Champion. So for me, in terms of this show, the most exciting thing is I'd like to know like the 861, because I don't know a lot about it, to be honest with you. I'd like to know the 861. I'd like to know like that whole time period where you were approached and what happened and that whole thing. And what years that was as well would be really helpful.
Oh my gosh, what year? Somebody can just do an internet search for Wesley Snipes indictment, and they'll come up with the year. I don't recall what it is. But the 861 argument essentially says there are sources of income from within the United States and without. That's, for your audience, that's a legal term. Without the United States and within the United States. Okay? Without means outside of.
Yeah.
Okay? And that for most taxes, not all, for most taxes, it has to be from sources within the United States to be taxable. Okay? That's a bare bones explanation of the framework of 861. And so the position that was taken by Larkin Rose and his predecessors, whose name eludes me, Thurston Bell, that's what it was. Thurston Bell was the original creator of the 861 idea. And basically they said, so 861 controls everything in the tax code. Okay, it has to pass muster of the 861, and it's 861 et sequitur. There's many. It's in the regulations. It's probably I don't know, 100 pages of 8-point type. Okay, so it's very involved, and so the theory was unless your income comports itself with 861, you don't know. You don't have to file a tax return. Okay. And that 861 controlled the entire rest of the tax code. Everything was predicated on 861 et sequitur. So Wesley somehow got hooked up with this 861 argument. I don't know from who. And so after he was indicted, and this goes to how the government eventually, this stuff gets on their radar. Okay, they eventually prosecuted Larkin Rose, and they prosecuted Wesley, who of course was a much bigger name, much better for PR. So two people called me. It was a conference call. They called me out of the blue. And I was busy doing some stuff at the office, and my secretary said, there's some people on the phone for you. I said, do they have an appointment? They said, no, but they represent Wesley Snipes. Really? Okay, put them through. So these two people are on the phone with me.
I looked it up. It was 2010, actually, same year as your book, actually. That case, the United States versus Wesley Snipes, yeah.
So basically they called me to ask me if I would like to be on Wesley Snipes' defense team.
Yeah, that's right.
And I said, I would love to be a part of Wesley Snipes' defense team because I would love to have a hand in kicking the shit out of DOJ's tax division. Okay. I said, but in order to do that, Wesley needs to let go of 861 because it is not controlling for the entire code. It has an entirely different role than that. And he needs to rely on what the law really, the totality of the tax code says, the three classes that we've talked about a couple times. And the fact that he filled out these, W-9s when he was working, which means he's a U.S. citizen or domestic corporation receiving U.S. source income belonging to a foreign person. Okay. And I said, so once we can show that those are not factual, that the presumptions that the prosecution is working on, that's not the fact situation, because, the fact and the law have to do this, right? Okay. So I said, once we destroy their fact situation, the case is over. They will seek dismissal.
Yeah.
And there was a lead gentleman on the call, and he said to me, literally, 861 is the hill that Wesley is willing to die on. Now, to be clear,
did he know? Did he? Because I was he researching all this, or did he just kind of let everybody else handle it? Was he kind of like hands off, or was he like hands in, like looking at everything, like researching? Was he like part of the team, or was he more like, I spent a lot of money on professionals, I'm going to let them handle it, and like they've got it because I've got tons of money, and what was his?
I don't know because I never spoke to him personally, and that was the point I was about to make. When that gentleman said to me, 861 is the hill Wesley is prepared to die on, I don't know that that is a factual statement. That the real statement might have been, we are so committed, we, the people on the phone, are so committed to 861 that we're not going to let you on the team if you don't agree with us. Okay? This is the hill we're prepared for Wesley to die on. Which obviously wouldn't be a very ethical position. Yeah. So I thanked them for the call, and I said, gentlemen, I'm at your disposal at any time should you choose to change your position. The actual law will cause DOJ to seek a dismissal of the indictment. But the way you're doing it, that's not going to play out. And they thanked me for my time, and we went our separate ways. So of course we all know how that story ended.
We do.
Yeah. The reality is 861 is a litmus test for people upon whom Congress has imposed the tax. So the tax has to be imposed upon somebody first. Okay. Non-resident aliens with U.S. source income, foreign corporations with U.S. source income, U.S. citizens.
I talk about this. This is one of the things I talk about in a lot of my shows. If you go to the frivolous tax arguments, they always use the term taxpayer, and then you look at 26 USC 7701 subsection A14, taxpayer. Definition of taxpayer is any person who is subject to any internal revenue tax. That's just absolutely hysterical. I mean, that is the loophole to end all loopholes. It's like, my God, it's there are people who are subject to internal revenue tax who say they are not subject to internal revenue tax. It's basically the entire frivolous tax arguments website in one sentence.
Yes. So I tell people in my book, I ask them, because by 2010, when the book was published, the IRS already had its, frivolous tax protester argument website page up. Yeah. So I ask people in the early stages of the book, I say, please don't go to that page now. Okay? I tell them that when you've completed this book, because I've got a whole later chapter in the book that outlines exactly what you're talking about, where it says the IRS says this, how do we break this down? How do we interpret this?
Yeah.
Can you identify the scam that's being run on you by the language they employ, which you just illustrated beautifully, right? So I tell them at the early stages, please don't go to the IRS's website because you're not equipped to deal with it. Okay? And then later in the book, I tell them, now that you know what the law really says, and now that I have shared several examples with you on how they play word games, now go to the frivolous taxpayer argument page, and you will be able to debunk every single one of the things. Now, that's not true. Not every single one. Because there are some frivolous arguments. There are legitimately. I don't know if you know. Yeah. I was enjoined from assisting my fellow Americans in successfully living out the truth of the income tax. I don't know if you're aware of that. And the way that worked is DOJ took me to court civilly for an injunction. And an IRS agent who'd been assigned for years to silence me, using an IRS-approved pseudonyms, to this day we don't know who he is. The pseudonym was Thomas Chung. Okay, he filed a declaration with the civil court. He never appeared. He filed a declaration, and he said the following. Mr. Champion tells his clients, okay, that the term person in the tax code does not include a natural person. That the term wages, as used in 3402 or 3401, defined using the definitions for payroll withholding, that wages are not taxable. And the third thing that Thomas Chung alleged that I was telling my clients was that the income tax is voluntary and nobody has to file. Now, this is going to go to your point here. I'm going to circle back to what you were saying. So first of all, I've been at this 31 years. I've never said any of those things. Anybody who's read Income Tax Shattering the Myths, when they hear that the government alleged I said those things, they're like, what the fuck? I mean, I literally say in the book, if you're made liable, you have to file, period, end of story. Right? There's no way around that if you're within one of the 3 tax classes. And I pointed out the part about voluntary. Obviously, if my belief was that filing tax returns is voluntary, that would feature prominently in my book. You can't find it anywhere in there. I've never said that the term person as defined for subtitle A, that it does not include the natural person. And I've never said that the term wages as defined for the purpose of payroll withholding is not taxable. Because it is. Because what they did is they took this, well, you know how this works, right? They take the term wages, which we all understand from the English dictionary, and Congress changes the definition and makes it something that's like super, super narrow, right? And then they say, okay, this right here, this is taxable, and we're going to call this wages. Well, okay. If you want to redefine a word from the English dictionary to have a very limited meaning for the purpose of applying a tax to it, then okay. It's tricky and it's scummy, and obviously it's not transparent. You're trying to not be the opposite of transparent. But okay, the Supreme Court has said you can do that. So I never said any of those things. And I have a standing $50,000 offer for anyone who can show at any place, at any time in all of human history that I said not all 3 of those things. They don't have to prove that I said all 3 of those things to get the money. All they have to do is prove that I've ever said one of those things. Now, because I never said any of those things, and I told my attorney that was representing me at the injunction hearing, I said, this is absolutely absurd. Now, first of all, why did the government make those 3 assertions? Because those have been adjudicated by the federal courts repeatedly to be frivolous. Okay? So they needed to come up with something that under stare decisis was frivolous, right? So my attorney says to the judge, we're sitting there one day, and he says, Your Honor, I'm requesting an evidentiary hearing so that we can, so that Thomas Chung can inform us, the defense, exactly where and when Mr. Champion said these things, because Mr. Champion contends he's never said any of those things to anyone ever. Now, you know, that's due process, right? If the government's going to make an allegation, you know, that's what they call a naked assertion. And then the defense has the opportunity to find out if the government's representations are factual. That's due process. Mm-hmm. So my attorney requested an evidentiary hearing, and the judge said, motion denied. He said, basically, if Thomas Chung filed this declaration saying that Mr. Champion said those things for the purpose of this court's decision-making, that's true. Mr. Champion has no due process right to challenge it.
Wow.
Yeah. So what this really means is the prosecutor, whose name eludes me right now, and the judge literally conspired. They committed multiple felonies. They conspired in advance because there's no way that the prosecutor was going to submit Thomas Chung's declaration. No less would Thomas Chung submit his declaration if they knew it could be challenged and found to be perjurious, right? They had to have this all set up in advance that the defense would not be allowed to prove it was perjurious. So the government conspired with the judge in advance outside the presence of the defense to make sure that the declaration that the assistant U.S. attorney knew he was submitting a perjurious document. Thomas Chung knew he was submitting a perjurious document. And they committed multiple felonies by arranging with the judge in advance to ensure that its nature could never be, that the court would never allow its perjurious nature to be revealed. How's that for rigging the courtroom?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is, I mean, you know, one of the things I teach in a lot of my stuff is that, you know, when you take on a bar card attorney, bar card attorneys only represent infants and persons of unsound mind as per corpus juris secundum. And when you take on a bar card attorney, an attorney at law, you waive all your rights and you don't have any rights, and they can kind of do whatever they want. And they can sign all the bonds on behalf of you to put you in prison, and they can do all this fun stuff. Whereas the way that I operate and the way that we operate is as attorneys in fact, and through the power of attorney, we can write up the whole contract, and we're very, very specific as to, all the rights that are reserved versus all the rights that are given away. And one of the rights that I have my clients give away in my power of attorney, I only have them give away 2 rights. The first right is the ability to grant jurisdiction. And the second right that I take away from them is the ability to endorse any negotiable instrument with a blank endorsement, which basically means,
if your audience is familiar, so am I. You don't need to explain it.
I'm surprised you haven't gotten too much into like the bills of exchange and stuff like that with the IRS, because this is really powerful. The bills of exchange and the promissory notes and how all this works and how endorsements work and how you can sign with a blank endorsement or a special endorsement. I mean, you can get $400 million in IRS debt to just vanish just by endorsing the instrument and sending a cover letter on how to process it. I've even seen
I'd be thrilled sometime when we both have some time to get on the phone and kick it around.
Oh yeah. There's even one thing that I saw. I would have to look it up on my phone. Actually, this is interesting. Let me pull this up real quick. I wanted to ask you about this because this is something that, let me see here. Give me just a moment. Wasn't ready for this one. Here it is. Check this out. Let me do a little screen share here because I want to get back to your story. I want to hear more about the Wesley Snipes thing, but I want to just jump onto this real quick. I'm curious about this. Let's see here. Screen share. Entire screen. And then this is going to be 3.8.45.10.1. 3.8.10 3.8.45 5.10 3.8.45 5.10. It's so funny how much stuff. There we go. 3.8.45 5.10 and then 1. Here it is. You ever seen this one?
Is this must be the Internal Revenue Manual I'm looking at?
Something like that. I don't know. I actually.
Well, I say that because the numbering format, the 3.8. Let's see here, manual.
IRM. Yeah, IRM.
The Internal Revenue Manual. Yeah, that because they use that decimal 3.8 point whatever. They've used that for decades. That's why I presumed it was part of the IRM.
Yeah, this is what we use, and it works wonders.
Yeah, can we have just a moment for me to read here what it says?
Sure.
Okay. Very interesting.
And a bill of exchange is an unconditional order to pay. If you look in UCC 3, Article 3, and under negotiable instruments, and you go to negotiable instruments 3-104, it says here, negotiable instrument means an unconditional promise or order to pay a fixed amount of money. So it's anything that evidences a debt, right? So when the IRS sends you a bill, the bill itself is an unconditional order to pay. It is a negotiable instrument. And you can literally just write some instructions on it and turn it into a security, and you can mail it to this address as a bill of exchange or a registered bill of exchange when you convert it over, when you put the endorsement on it and you put a cover sheet on it. And it authorizes the campus to settle the account through Fedwire, which means that you basically authorize the IRS to take that bill of exchange that's been released and to go to what's called the Federal Reserve window, discount window, and they can literally swap that bill of exchange for Federal Reserve notes, and then they can place it on the account and they zero out the account. Pretty wild stuff.
Interesting.
I wasn't sure if you've ever seen that. You've never seen anybody do that ever?
I have not. No.
Interesting.
Also, if I may, and again, I'm not being critical because I don't know enough about it to be supportive or critical. Let me be very clear about that. This is my first time seeing the text that you just put up on the screen.
Yeah. No, I understand. I mean,
How long have you or the people that follow you, how long have you guys been using this approach?
Well, just a couple of years. I mean, couple of years, probably a couple of years. We send it in and they process it. There's not anything goofy or weird or anything. We just send it in and we send in a cover sheet. I mean, I did a lot of research on this, like how do people get access to the Federal Reserve window and how does that work and how does it all work? Like, so there's two types of negotiable instruments. There's promissory notes, there's bills of exchange. And when you sign up for, let's say, a car and there's a promissory note, when you sign the promissory note, it gives the promissory note all of its power. And then they take that promissory note, and that promissory note, now called a collateral security, and they go to the Federal Reserve window and they swap that collateral security, the original promissory note, for Federal Reserve notes. And the section in banking that talks about how that works, I can actually show it to you, is 12 USC 412, application for notes collateral required, right? And this is the section that talks about how they go to the Federal Reserve window and they can take these collateral securities, which are notes, drafts, bills of exchange, etc., and they can swap them for Federal Reserve notes at the Federal Reserve window. And this is how, quote, money is printed in America, right? It's Federal Reserve notes are a promissory note, and then the original promissory note is a promissory note, and you're just swapping one promissory note for a different promissory note, right? And this is the same process that we used with the IRS, because they'll accept bills of exchange as a collateral security. So you release that collateral security to the Internal Revenue Service to be used for the application for notes from 12 USC 412, and they can actually do it, and that's what this is talking about. A bill of exchange, a registered bill of exchange, being received from a taxpayer, authorizing the campus to settle the account through FedWire. FedWire is just the electronic version of what is used by the Federal Reserve window.
Sure. I'm familiar with that.
And I don't know what Form 9814 is. I don't know what that is. But anyways, we've been doing this for a couple of years, but I know there's some old timer type guys that have done this. This is not something necessarily new. It's just something that I've found to be very effective. So we do it a lot. I like things that are effective. Effective and transparent. I like things that are effective and transparent. I don't like goofiness where there's some goofiness and it's goofy and it seems to work and we're not sure why and like that kind of thing. I don't like that kind of stuff. So
speaking of goofiness, and since you just brought up the Cornell Law website, do you want to talk about 31 USC 321?
31 USC 321. Which one is that? That's the one. Oh gosh, yeah, that's the one I posted the other day. Someone sent it to me. Yeah, and you wanted to talk about that. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things we could talk about, but yeah, let's go for it. This is
because I'm going to tell you what that's about.
Right?
D3, I believe.
D3.
I haven't looked at it in years, but I think it's D3.
The Secretary of the Treasury may invest and reinvest the fund in public debt securities with maturities suitable for the needs. That one?
No.
Let's see.
Maybe it's 3D.
It's D1. I think it's D1. The Secretary of the Treasury may accept, hold, administer, and use gifts and bequests of property, both real and personal, for the purpose of aiding or facilitating the work of the Department of the Treasury. Yeah.
Now, the next sentence. Go with the next sentence.
Let's see here. Gifts and bequests of money and the proceeds from sales of other property received as gifts or bequests shall be deposited in the Treasury in a separate fund and shall be dispersed on order of the Secretary of the Treasury.
There's part of that.
Property accepted under this paragraph and the proceeds thereof shall be used as nearly as possible in accordance with the terms of the gift or bequest.
There's part of that there that says
what's funny is this is actually very
gift tax income tax, estate, and gift tax shall be says something shall be exist.
D2 for purposes of federal income,
D2.
Estate, and gift taxes. Property accepted under paragraph 1 shall be considered as a gift or bequest, or for the use of the United States. Now this is fascinating too. I'm just rereading this again because this actually goes directly with the negotiable instrument stuff. So when you sign a negotiable instrument with no instructions at all, it's called a blank endorsement, which means that there's no conditions attached to it at all whatsoever, and you can do whatever you want. And then what happens is the banks stamp a special endorsement. They claim the value of the security, and then they go to the Federal Reserve window and swap it for Federal Reserve notes. It's funny because if you read D1 here, you can actually attach conditions to your donations.
Well, the point is when it says that income, estate, and gift tax shall be considered as a gift.
Yeah.
Okay. So the reason that that's in there is we talked about the three classes upon whom the income tax has been imposed. And we've talked about the fact situation, and the facts have to match the law in order for there to be, for instance, a legal assessment. Okay. And the legal assessment is the basis for collection activities and seizure of property, et cetera, et cetera. Absent the part that you're reading there about income, estate, and gift tax shall be considered as a gift, okay? Absent that, there might be some liability for the IRS when the fact situation does not match, and they have a legal duty to know what the fact situation is before they proceed. But what happens is under 31 USC 321, they have the ability to simply turn around and say, oh, well, if it didn't match, you talked about 7701A14 definition of taxpayer a little bit ago.
Yeah, yeah.
So if Joe Blow's fact situation did not meet that definition, just go over here to 321. It was a gift.
Yeah. I know. It's
the pressure vent.
That's why I hate the word refund. I hate the word refund because it's not really a refund. It's it depends. Whatever, they get in all these different definitions and stuff like that. But it's just, it's a gift, and it's just so, There's so many ways. It's funny when you go down these rabbit holes. There's so many different ways to cook it. There's just so many different ways, and it's just the number one barrier to all of this information, because we get into naturalization, we get into nationality a lot with a lot of what I teach. We go and we change our situation through the passport system from U.S. citizen to non-citizen national, and we attach documentation to the passport, and we get passports issued, and we do all sorts of things, and we have all sorts of fun. And once the fear subsides, it's pretty much just there's so many different ways to do all this stuff, and there's so many different ways to win that it's actually overwhelming. It's just the fear is the only thing that prevents people from looking at it. At first you're like, well, how do I win? And then after a couple of years you're like, how could I lose? It's like there's just so many different ways to win. It's like unbelievable.
Fear is a powerful motivator. I was asked in an interview several days ago why I think most Americans have shown so little interest in the truth about the income tax, considering that they're just literally giving away their property out of ignorance. And, one of the several reasons that I stated was fear. The other one being indifferent. It's like, what's that old expression? The last thing a fish would notice is water. Well, when you've been born into the matrix, and in this case, we'll say that the matrix is the false narrative about the income tax, And somebody say 45 years old, and they started working at 15. So for 30 years, they've been giving the government a share of their labor for free. And I ask people, so if you work and somebody else takes 100% of the reward from that work, that's inarguably slavery. So what percentage isn't slavery? Is if they take 70%, are you a slave? If they take 40%, are you a slave? And you can literally watch somebody's eyes glaze over when you have that conversation with them because they're so inured. They are literally, I know this is an overused word in this country, but they've literally been raised to be tax sheep. And when you say to them, you've been lied to, it's never imposed upon you. Stop doing this insane anti-liberty, anti-freedom thing. Stop it. For a lot of people, it's just even hard for them to connect to that because of not just fear. We all know that's a part of it, but the indifference, having done something, having prostituted themselves for 30 years. They don't understand what it would be like to live not prostituting themselves. And so that's not attractive to them because they can't comprehend what it would be like.
Yeah.
And it is a very liberating experience. And then obviously,
yeah, I mean, one of the main issues we do have, which is pretty well known, is getting employers to do this kind of stuff. You use the W-8BEN or the 8233 or whatever we have to do to get it to work. Issuing new I-9s, we do all sorts of things depending on however we have to do it. And some employers are fine with it. Some employers locally are fine with it, and then it goes to the large payroll companies and they freak out. We have a lot of people who are being denied by payroll companies and that kind of thing to change their tax situation and to file new tax forms to change their tax situation. And, what I tell people all the time is, it's all voluntary. Everything is voluntary. The way it works is it's all based on voluntary compliance as per 26 CFR 601, 602, subsection A, right? You have the voluntary compliance, right? And the thing is that that's why the revocation of election exists, in my opinion, because it's voluntary and you can voluntarily unvolunteer at any point in time. And if you look in the United States Code, we're actually using a lot of these Title 18. We're using things like forced labor, peonage, which is debt slavery. It's actually an entire section in the United States Code in Title 18. There's involuntary servitude, which is another one that's in Title 18. And there's a whole bunch of these that we're actually using because the thing is that I feel like even within the confines of the goofiness we call the voluntary system, once you finally do wake up and you say, I'm no longer volunteering, and anyone prevents you from not volunteering, and it's never going to be the IRS, by the way. It's always going to be an employer or a payroll company. That Absolutely. Is even within the realm of the game that we don't know we're playing. That's real involuntary servitude. That's real peonage. And once you raise your hand and you say, you know what, I've been thinking about it, and I'm done volunteering, to force them after that point, even within the confines of all the laws and all the assumptions and all the legalities and all the tax code, that's where involuntary servitude begins. And we're seeing that with these employers. And it becomes a bit of a war, kind of like what you were talking about earlier, losing 2/3 of your because they're attempting to end that voluntary status, and the large payroll companies and all that make it difficult. And for a while we were actually calling the IRS and because I have like tens of thousands, or I don't even know how many people that watch all my stuff and do all this stuff. And they were calling. I said, you know what, just call the IRS and tell them that you're trying to file these other forms and you're not able to, and you need help. IRS agents were calling the employers, and they were actually telling the employers, no, like if they want to file different forms, like you actually have to accept the forms. You can't just deny the forms. Sometimes they were calling on behalf, sometimes they were not. I got someone told me recently that if you call the IRS and you ask them about the W-8BEN and you want help with the W-8BEN, they transfer you to a recorded message that says, we no longer offer any phone assistance on form W-8BEN, which is brand new. I just heard this from someone like 2 or 3 days ago. So the whole thing is just fascinating to me. The whole thing is just wild.
May I share something with you from about payroll withholding?
Yeah, please.
Okay. This is just from a statutory angle, and bear with me here. Okay. So 3402 is in subtitle C is the command to deduct and withhold. And then 3401 gives the definitions relevant to that scheme. Okay? So I don't know if you're aware, you probably are. The use of the word includes in the tax code sets up a category. Any itemized, anything that appears after the word includes, those items create a category. And things that are not listed, but within the category, are considered to be included even though they're not enumerated. The example I often give is if Congress passed a law and defined food as strawberries, peaches, and grapes, the class would clearly be fruit, right?
Yeah.
So you could add kiwis, you could add blueberries. Even though they're not enumerated, they would still be applicable in that law because they fit the category of the enumerated items. That's the way includes operates in the tax code. Okay? So this is the definition of employee for the purpose of payroll withholding. The term employee includes an officer, employee, or elected official of the United States, a state, or a political subdivision thereof, or the District of Columbia, or any agency or instrumentality of any one or more of the foregoing. So what's the class? What's the category? It's people who work for various government agencies, right? Should I read it again? Because I know it might have caught some people off guard. Okay, so the term employee means, okay, includes. So now anything after includes sets up a category.
Mm-hmm.
An officer, employee, or elected official of the United States, a state, or any political subdivision thereof, or the District of Columbia, or any agency or instrumentality of any one or more of the foregoing. Okay. So I once had a call on behalf of a client, this is going back many, many moons ago. I once had a call, and so I asked her if she was in the payroll department. And I said, are you in front of a computer? Yes, I am. Okay. Can you please go to 26 U.S.C. 3401C, the definition of employee, and let's read that together. So she read through it. Now, I didn't even bother to get into includes. I said, okay, so you see who's enumerated there, right? Yes. Said, so this is a private sector firm, someplace back in the Midwest, to the best of my recollection after all these years. And I said, so tell me, no matter how badly you tried to mangle that definition, is there anything in that definition that could embrace your employee, Tom, who wants you to stop withholding? Her response to me was, I don't want to talk to you about the law anymore. So
I feel bad for these payroll companies and stuff because if they, because if you look at involuntary servitude or peonage, it's like 20 to 25 years in prison. I mean, it's really, really nasty stuff. And we're starting to see that happening, and it's just like these companies. This story did have
a happy ending.
Sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's okay. It was a relatively small company, maybe 35 employees. And so Tom had known the owner for years and had worked there for years. So Tom, the employee, and the owner, and this gal that was had been handling his payroll for 20 years, they all got in the office, and the owner said, "So when Mr. Champion showed you the definition of employee for the purpose of payroll withholding, and there was no way it could include this company or Tom, my understanding is you didn't have any response to that. Is that true?" And she said, "Yes, that's true." He said, "Well, in that case, stop withholding from Tom." Okay.
Nice.
So this was somebody who had enough integrity to actually say, "You've been at this 20 years. If you can't answer this one simple question that should have been asked 20 years ago when you started taking people's pay, if you can't answer that question, we can no longer withhold from Tom." So somebody who had a brain and integrity, which both of those seem to be lacking these days when we get into these discussions with companies.
I know. Yeah. It's, well, that's why I don't know. Have you done a lot with the non-citizen national stuff in terms of the I-9 and adjusting people's from U.S. citizen to non-citizen nationals, and kind of, have you gone down that rabbit hole at all, or no?
I haven't, and the reason is, of course, I'm focused on income tax. I'm not focused on a much broader swath. And there's all sorts of arguments, such as the United States means only Washington D.C. It doesn't include the states of the union. There's all these different positions that people hold, and I have found, for instance, we'll use that as an example. So if it has to be U.S. source income, and U.S. means Washington D.C., who's getting any money from Washington, D.C., right?
Yeah, I know. Have you ever seen that? Has anyone ever shown you that before? Shown you where that comes from?
That. Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, I just want to make sure.
7701A, what, 10, I think is definition, 9 or 10 is definition of United States and state. But my issue is this.
We use our UCC Article 9, Section 307. I don't know if you've ever seen that one before. I'll just show it really quick because it's always fun. It's one of the first ones I always show whenever I go on shows. You can see here subsection H. This is UCC 9-307.
Throw some glasses on so I can see what it says.
I highlighted it there at the blue.
Yeah. My problem with relying on the UCC is that the UCC is a model code. It's not actually law. Various states have enacted certain parts of it. But for instance,
almost
the United
all
States
there in a lot of the states. If you go into the state code, it's like they just cut it up and change the name, but it's basically just the UCC. I mean, it's,
Yeah. And the federal government has not enacted the UCC as federal law. So I'm not criticizing anybody who looks at the UCC or considers it in their dealings. I don't, because especially when dealing with the IRS, which is a federal agency, and the federal government has never enacted the UCC into law. Although there is an interesting court case that said the 1986 revision of the tax code was intended to bring it into compliance with the UCC.
As far as I'm concerned, the UCC is, as far as I'm concerned, the UCC is, because let's take UCC 3, for example. It's all about negotiable instruments, right? The UCC 3 is the backbone of literally everything. Every penal bond, every single certificate of title for a car, every single quitclaim deed, every single everything is all some sort of security or bond or whatever. And all those bonds and everything in this country operates through the functionality of the creation and transfer and exchanging of bonds. And the senior body of information that covers how all that works is UCC Article 3. So even though they say these things, it's blah, blah, blah. But the thing is that actually, in fact, I think that especially with UCC3 in particular, it's above these things. It's actually even senior to they may not. It's a little bit weird. They pretend as though it's not, and they say it's not, and they kind of this and they kind of that, but everything operates based off of UCC3. Everything operates based off of UCC3. So I'm just kind of like, so it's a little bit weird,
do you know off the top of your code when the UCC was written?
The first one is like way back, like 51 or 53 or something. When was the UCC published? 1952. Yeah.
Okay, so the very first version of it was 1952.
Yeah.
Okay. Just curious, because a lot of these principles that you're discussing existed prior to 1952. So I'm
you have like the Bill of Exchange Act, and you have like these various things, but in terms of like its codification, in terms of like what I would consider how things operate in today's world, it's like the Bill of Exchange Act comes from 1882, so you have like some older stuff and that kind of thing, but the UCC changed a bunch of things, and it like removed a bunch of terms, and I have not seen any of those older terms used since 1952. So in terms of the operation, as far as I can tell, being in this arena of negotiable instruments and stuff like that, you even bring up things like, some of the old endorsement types they used to have before 1952, and you just don't see that anywhere. It doesn't exist anymore. So I don't know. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating study to me anyways. But yeah, I mean, could you bring up those old types of endorsement, and could you do things? I don't know. I've never needed to, because UCC3 covers everything that I feel that I need to use. So I've never gone down that path, but every time I bring up the UCC, every time I use it in a court or anything like that, it seems to work pretty well. So it's just kind of like it's kind of a weird thing. The whole thing's kind of weird, but yeah.
I think I would love to see some of your documentation on the cases you've won. And the reason I say that, and I mean, no, I'm not besmirching you at all. Yeah. But I had a case, oh God, I don't know when it was, 13, 14 years ago. A woman sent me an email and excoriated me because I made the comment that the UCC is not law, it's a model code. That not all states have adopted it, and some states have adopted some parts, but not other parts, and so forth. And she heard me say this on some show or podcast or something a long time ago. And she wrote me this scathing email, and she said, I've won my cases against this federal agency and that federal agency in this state. She listed, I don't know, a dozen different cases that she'd won using the UCC. Okay. So you talked about effective and transparent earlier on. And I'm thinking, okay, if this is the miracle cure, I want to know about it. Okay. Mm-hmm. If it's transparent and effective, I want to know about it. So I said, good on you. Can you please send me preferably the case files? But if that's too arduous, can you send me the case citations on these cases that you won using the UCC?
Mm-hmm.
Silence. After motherfucking me up one side and down the other for saying something that she considered inaccurate, and then barraging me with the dozen or so cases that she'd won using the UCC. When I asked her to substantiate that, and I asked in good faith, it wasn't a gotcha. If you can show me these cases that you won with the UCC, I got myself a new tool, right? Nothing. Zero. So, this is why I'd love for you and I to get together, off the air and kick some of this stuff around.
I'd love to.
Because I've never, I hear a lot of talk, but I don't see a lot of results. And you're talking about results, so I'd like to see those. because I've got a fairly significant audience. And, if these things can be validated, these wins can be validated, people need to know. I talked about this earlier on. People need to know, right? Whether we're talking about the truth of the income tax, whether we're talking about what you're saying about the UCC, anything that is legal, or maybe we should say lawful, that is effective and transparent and works, the American people need to know about.
Yeah, the bill of exchange stuff and the promissory note stuff, which normally is attributed to UCC3, does work really well. I have a lot of stuff I can show you on that. Whether it's specifically from UCC3 or if it's more from the Bill of Exchange Act of 1882, I couldn't really tell you. It's kind of an interesting conversation in itself, actually. Where does this power come from? Does it come from UCC3? Does it come from the Bill of Exchange Act, or where does it? I'm not even sure anybody really knows. That's the thing. I don't think this is not an arena. This arena that I'm kind of playing in right now. I think even if I did ask that to a federal judge, I'm not sure they would even be able to tell me the answer. So it's just kind of it's just kind of a little bit of a vague zone. But yeah, the Bill of Exchange stuff and the promissory note stuff, it's really great and it works great. And we've got a lot of examples I'd love to share with you. And the cases I'm currently involved in are in progress. And I don't necessarily use the UCC. The way that I do it is I word everything in the court case to be in accordance with UCC3, but I use just like common parlance. Like I'll say something like, a negotiable instrument is either an unconditional promise to pay or an unconditional order to pay, right? I don't say because of the UCC. I just say that. I just say the fact, right? And then I say Federal Reserve note is a promissory note. And then I say, the original promissory note that was signed to get this car is a collateral security as per 12 USC 412. So I throw in a couple little things about the UCC in there, but I pretty much keep it more along the lines of like the actual technical process of how the things actually work. And I don't say because the UCC said this is what it is. I just say, this is the way it is. You know it. I know it. So it's an interesting conversation. Does that power come from UCC3 or does it come from the Bill of Exchange Act? I have no idea, but it works. It's a functional thing. And I'd love to show you some of that stuff. So we'll definitely get on the phone and I can show you some of my stuff. I can send you some links and stuff like that. Definitely love to do that. Because I think for a big audience like yours, anyone who does have any tax bills that are coming in, the Bill of Exchange avenue is very simple and it's very workable, and the IRS loves it because they can turn around, they can stick it in the window, the Federal Reserve window, and out pops Federal Reserve notes, and they put them on your account, and then they're paid. It's done.
Case closed.
Case closed. Yeah, and they don't freak out. They don't, because if you look at the definition of the word payment, the definition of the word payment means performance on an obligation or contract. And when you send back the Bill of Exchange and you endorse it properly as per the Bill of Exchange Act, it's actually legally a payment, which is pretty wild. But yeah, I can go on and on about promissory notes and bills of exchange all day long, honestly.
Yeah, I'm just remaining silent because this is not an area that I have any expertise in.
Oh, I'm very excited. I'll share with you some stuff, and I think you'll find it very, very fascinating. Like, for example, income, right? What is income? Income is the receipt of Federal Reserve notes. Well, Federal Reserve notes are negotiable instruments called promissory notes. Promissory notes are evidences of a debt. They are not intrinsically have value. So lawful money is gold and silver coins as per Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution. So how can you define income as receiving a debt instrument called a promissory note? It doesn't actually have any intrinsic value. It's like zeros. Like Federal Reserve notes are just zeros. So it's like getting a whole bunch of zeros. How can a whole bunch of zeros equal thousands of dollars? It can't. I mean, the whole thing, like I said, the whole thing is just like, it's just goofiness. Like the more you study it, it's just like, there's just so much goofiness. And there's just so many goofy things. It's just so funny to me. You know what I mean?
There's a reason that the Federal Reserve Act and the Income Tax Act were both passed in 1913 by the same Congress.
Yeah.
They are integrally linked.
Yep.
The purpose of the income tax is to
All right,
pay
my
the
friend.
interest on the federal debt.
Yeah. All right, my friend. So where can everybody find you? They can find you to get your book. Where can they get your book?
drreality.news, drreality.news. Just click on store. I've got that. I've got body science, which we didn't talk about today, a whole different issue. There's some handbooks in there that will help people. We talked about talking to employers. We talked about when somebody requests a W-9. There's some handbooks in there that can help people communicate if they're not articulate enough or don't believe themselves to be articulate enough. They can use these handbooks to give to the party requesting the IRS forms from them as a helper tool. So there's some things there that and if somebody wants to drop me an email about something, dave@drreality.news.
Awesome, my friend. Thank you very much. You're amazing. Love your story. Love what you're
Thanks
doing.
for the opportunity.
And yeah, I'll get this out in the next couple of days, and I'll blast it out to my email list, and we'll get everybody on the Dave Champion train. I love it. I want everybody reading your book. I will read your book. I promise.
All right, and then I'm going to hit you up for some time to tell me about some of these other things.
Yeah, let's do it. I love it, man. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm going to turn this off, and then